Ayubowan everyone. Welcome to the Iron Bloods Institute. This is the sixth episode of the series, Our Elites Just Suck. This is the series where we explain why our current elites suck and are so bad at doing their job. Since they suck so bad, we now include step-by-step guides on how they should be doing their jobs to get Sri Lanka out of this mess. In the last video, we explained the action plan Sri Lanka needs to tackle its import dependence on energy. At the end, we discussed how diplomacy would play a key role in securing Chinese small modular reactors and crude from Russia. As many of you may be aware, Sri Lanka is also suffering from a serious case of crony capitalism. While the common man has trouble having 3 square meals a day, there is a class of ultra-rich that have sent obscene amounts of wealth out of Sri Lanka using various shady methods over the past few years. It is time to use any means necessary to force these ultra-wealthy businessmen to bring these funds back to Sri Lanka. I will refer to these ultra-wealthy businessmen as local oligarchs going forward. These funds will be expropriated and used to fund Sri Lanka's industrialization efforts. Keep in mind, Ranil and the current administration is prepared to sell even profit-making state-owned enterprises for a paltry 2.9 billion US dollars over the course of about 3 to 4 years. I say this just so you understand the true scale of the fraud committed by these local oligarchs at the largest of the Sri Lankan employees and taxpayers. The investigation by firms like Global Financial Integrity, also known as GFI, have shown the public of Sri Lanka and the world that this sort of thing has been going on since the Yahapalana government, the last time Ranil was in power. It is so bad that even Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, current governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, has brought it up several times. He threatened to publicly name and shame the companies, local oligarchs, and business owners that engage in this practice, although he did back away from doing this at the last minute, like a coward. Following this expose, many unions and individuals signed letters publicly asking these local oligarchs to repatriate these funds immediately. They correctly made the case that repatriation and subsequently expropriation should be the path, instead of privatization. However, they failed to give an explanation how this would allow Sri Lanka to get out of the debt crisis. This video explains in detail how we will finance the industrialization drive that will not only get us out of this mess, but will eventually lead to Sri Lanka becoming a regional powerhouse. This strategy is nothing new and has been done by various governments all over the world at various points in history. Even in the USA, which is today known for its neoliberal economic system, the marginal tax rate during World War II was around 94% for high net worth individuals. The inspiration for this sort of taxation is mainly from Teddy Roosevelt, the 26th president of the USA. There is plenty of research on how his square deal policy and related tax reform took money from the ultra wealthy of the USA at the time and distributed it among the middle and lower class population. You can read up on this yourself because going into that right now would make this video an hour long. However, I will leave you this quote from one of his famous speeches. He is very clear that taking money from rich corporations and using it for the betterment of the middle and lower classes is a central condition in the progress of a nation. I agree, and this is exactly what Sri Lanka needs to do. Sri Lanka actually had something similar to this in the 1970s under our great Prime Minister Honorable Sirimao Bandaranayake. It was called the Criminal Justice Commission, and while people mostly focus on how it was used by her regime to control left-wing radical elements in the nation, it was also used to throw many local oligarchs that committed exchange control violations in jail. The local oligarchs that were thrown in jail for stashing funds abroad include nightclub owner Mubarak Taha, and casino owner A.R.M. Mukta. Of course, when JR came to power later on, he made sure to free many of these crooks, but that is a story for another time. This is the legalese of the Criminal Justice Commission, which was unfortunately decommissioned with the UNP gaining power. During the so-called Yahapalana government, the last time Ranil was in power, there was a hubbub about bringing back the Criminal Justice Commission to tackle corruption problems that were stuck in legal limbo. I guess nothing came of it when the ruling regime realized that they'd be targeted too once they lost power. I guess it was a good move on them with all the bond scam and whatnot. This repatriation and expropriation scheme is known even by the current administration. However, due to their own corruption, no one has the political will to make it happen. Here is Minister Bandula Gunawardena talking about it. Credit to the Satahan Radio YouTube channel for asking the question and posting the reply. Make sure you check their channel out too.
අද දිනේ අවසාන අවස්ථාව තරුදු උඩුවර ගෙදර මාධ්‍යවේදියාට
ඔව් මම ඉතාලම කෙටියෙන් මට තප්පර 30ක් විතර දෙන්න ඇමතුම් ආර්ථික විශේෂඥයෙක් වෙන නිසා මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ තේරෙවි වැටහෙවි ඒ නිසා මම කෙටියෙන් මේකට අදාළ කාරණා ටික අහන්න ටිකක් දිග විශේෂයකට අදාළ ප්‍රශ්නයක් දැන් අර අද අල් ජසීරා එකේ පහුගිය දවස්වල ගාඩියන් බ්ලූම්බර්ග් ඇතුළු මාධ්‍ය ආයතන ගණනාවක රිපෝට් වෙලා තිබුණා ජාත්‍යන්තර ආර්ථික විශේෂඥයන් 182 දෙනෙක් එකතු වෙලා දාපු ලිපියක් ලංකාවේ ආර්ථික අර්බුදය සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඔවුන් ඒකෙදි පෙන්නන කාරණා ගැන තමයි මම අහන්නේ කැබිනට් එකේ සාකච්ඡා කරනවා කියලා ඒකේ අහන ප්‍රධානම එකක් තමයි ලංකාවට ණය ඩෙට් කැන්සලේෂන් වලට යන්න පුළුවන් කියලා මොකද මේ ප්‍රයිවට් ණය ලබා දුන්න අයව ඒ අයගේ ප්‍රශ්න කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. අධිකරණ මැති විජේදාස රාජපක්ෂත් කියපු කතාවක් මේ ලිපියේ තියෙනවා. ඒ තමයි ලංකාවේ ඩොලර් අපේ ණය ඛණ්ඩට වඩා ණය අර්බුදයට වඩා විශාල මුදල් ප්‍රමාණයක් අනීතික ක්‍රම වලින් සහ ලංකාවට නොගෙන ඒම තුලින් ලංකාවේ ව්‍යාපාරික ප්‍රජාව සහ අනෙක් අය පිටමං කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒකට මේ දූෂිත මූල්‍ය ප්‍රවාහයක් ගැන දැන් මේ වෙද්දී ජාත්‍යන්තර වාර්තාවක් තියෙනවා ලංකාවේ ඇමතිවරුන් සහ චම්පි කරනවක වගේ ඇමතුමාගේ අය කියලා දෙනවා වගේම මුදල් මහ බැංකු අධිපතිවරයාත් මේ කාරණාව සහ මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශ ලේකම්වරයාත් පෙන්නලා දීලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මේ කාරණා, ඒ කියන්නේ ණය අර්බුදයේ මේ ණය කැන්සල් කිරීම අපිට කොයිතරම් දුරට යන්න පුළුවන්ද? ඒක ගැන සාකච්ඡා කරනවා. දෙවෙනි එක මේ පිටමං කරපු ධනය ගැන යම්කිසි නීති සංශෝධන මේවා ගෙන්වා ගැනීමේ ක්‍රමයක් තියෙනවද? මොකද අර ලංකාවේ අර්බුදයට මේක සමහර වෙලාවට ලොකු විසඳුමක් වෙන්න පුළුවන් නිසා ඉතින් මට හිතෙනවා එමෙතුමා ප්‍රශ්නේ තේරුම් ගත්තා කියලා මම කෙටියෙන් ඇහුවේ හැකිතරම්.
හරි. තම නැනපමණින් තමයි ආර්ථික කරුණු කාරණා ආර්ථික නොවන අවබෝධයක් තියන අය විසින් විශ්ලේෂණය කරන්නේ. මේ ධනය පිටරටවල රැඳවීම, අන්ඩර් ඉන්වොයිස්, ඕවර් ඉන්වොයිස් කල්ලි වෙලා විදේශ විනිමය නොගැනීම කියන ඒවා ලංකාවේ ආර්ථිකයේ නිදාස ලැබුණ දවසේ ඉඳන් තිබෙනවා. නිදාසට ඉස්සෙල්ලා හිටපු යටත් විජිත යුගවලත් ඒක වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා ඔබට මතක ඇති ගරු සිරිමාවෝ බණ්ඩාරනායක මැතිණිය විසින් වෙනම විදේශ විනිමය වංචා දූෂණ අක්‍රමිකතා පිළිබඳ අපරාධ යුක්ති විනිශ්චය කමිෂන් සභාව කියලා කමිෂන් සභාවක් පත් කළා. ඒ කමිෂන් සභාවෙන් ලංකාවේ ඉන්න එවකට හිටපු ඉතාම සුප්‍රසිද්ධ අති සුප්‍රසිද්ධ ව්‍යාපාර කරන අය මුදල් ගෙනාවේ නැහැ කියලා වන්දනාගාරගත කළ දඩුවම් කරලා. ඒ සමහර ඉතාම සුප්‍රසිද්ධ ව්‍යාපාරිකයෝ මිය ගියේ බන්ධනාගාරය තුළදී. ඒ කාලෙත් විනිමය රටින් පිටට පිටමං කිරීමේ ක්‍රමවේදය හැමදාම රටේ තිබෙනවා. එතකොට ඒ සඳහා සම්පූර්ණ වගකීම තියෙන්නේ විනිමය පිළිබඳ දේශපාලනඥයන්ට නෙමෙයි ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහ බැංකුවට. මුදල් නීති පනතේ විධිවිධාන අනුව විදේශ විනිමය සංචිත ඇති කිරීම, සංචිත පාලනය යනාදී කරන්නේ මහ බැංකුව. එතකොට මධ්‍යම බැංකුව විසින් මේවා පාලනය කරන්න අවස්ථාවක් තිබුණා. විදේශ විනිමය පාලන පනත කියලා පනතක් තිබුණා. Exchange Control Act කියලා. 2017 දී මේ පනත අවශ්‍ය කරන්න ගෙනා. ඒ අවස්ථාවේදී විපක්ෂයේ മന്ത്രിවරයෙක් ලෙස සිටි මම ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණයට ගිහිල්ලා කීවා මෙහෙම වක්කඩ ගැඩුවා වගේ සල්ලි පිට වෙලා යයි මේකට ඉඩ දෙන්න බෑ කියලා. පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ කමිටුවලදී පාලන කියන වචනේ දාන්න බෑ කිව්වා. ඒ නිසා අද විනිමය සංශෝධන පනත යටතේ විනිමය දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවක් තියෙන, විනිමය පාලන දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවක් නෙමෙයි. ඒ දවස්වල මේ කියන ඒවා ගැන මේ කියන පාර්ශ්වයන් කවුරුත් කතා කළේ නැහැ. ඒ නිසා දැන් අලුතෙන් ඇති වෙලා තියෙන තත්වයේ තුල අපිට මේ කියන ඒවා කාටවත් ඔප්පු කළ හැකි ආකාරයෙන් කියන දේවල් නෙමෙයි. එහෙම දන්නවා නම් දන්න කෙනෙකුට අපිට රටේ නීතියක් තියෙනවා. කවුරු හරි හංගවලා තියෙනවා නම් මුදල්, ඒ මුදල් අපිට සාක්ෂි වශයෙන් ඉදිරිපත් කරලා මේ රට අමාරු වෙලා තියෙන වෙලාවට ඒ සඳහා නීත්‍යානුකූලව ක්‍රියා කරන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැතුව හුදු කතාන්දරයක් කීමෙන් පමණක් ඒක ගෙන්නන්න බෑ. එහෙම ගෙන්නන්න පුද්ගලයන්ට අයිතියක් නැහැ. ඒක කිරීමේ කාර්යභාරය වගකීම තියෙන්නේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහ බැංකුවේ විනිමය පාලන නෙමෙයි විනිමය දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවට. එයයි තමයි මුදලේ අගය තීරණය කළ ඔය ඔබතුමාලාගේ පුවත්පත් වලට විනිමය අනුපාතය අද මෙතරයි කියලා තීරණය කරලා එවන්නේ. ඒ නිසා ඒ පිළිබඳ කටයුතු කිරීම වැදගත් කියලා මම පිළිගන්නවා. මොකද දැනුත් රටට එන්න ඕනේ මුදල් ප්‍රමාණය සම්පූර්ණයෙන් එන්නේ නැතුව කොටසක් ගෙන්න ගන්න ක්‍රමවේදය දීර්ඝ කාලයක ඉඳන් රට ඇතුලේ තියෙනවා. ඒ අවශ්‍ය පියවර ගන්න එක ප්‍රමාණවත් ලෙස සිද්ධ වෙලා නැහැ. ඒ අලුතෙන් බලලා ඉන්දියාව අපිට වඩා දැඩි ලෙස තමන්ගේ විදේශ විනිමය සම්පත් රටට ගෙන්න ගැනීම සඳහා දැඩි නීති රීති පද්ධතියක් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන අසල්වැසි රට ලෙස අපිට ඉන්දියාවෙනුත් ආදර්ශයක් ගන්න පුළුවන්. මම නම් මේ හා සම්බන්ධයෙන් පරාජය වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. මොකද මම මේ වෙනුවෙන් මැදිහත් වෙලා අධිකරණයවත් අපි කියන ඒවා පිළිඅරන් නැහැ. අධිකරණයේ විසින් තීන්දුව දෙන්නේ ඒ අධිකරණයට ඉදිරිපත් වෙන කරුණු කාරණා අනුව. ඒ නිසා අපි හිතන විදිය අනුව තමයි අපි අධිකරණයට ගිහිල්ලා මේවා නොකළ යුතුයි කියලා කියලා තියෙන්නේ.
Will this be easy? Of course not. You have to be naive to think that the rich local oligarchs won't do everything in their power to stop this. However, for the betterment of the nation as a whole, it must be done. Appropriate measures must be taken so that the same fate that awaited Sirivavo does not become ours as well. It's been 42 years since she was stripped of her rights as a civilian of Sri Lanka and ultimately assassinated. What's better than a gold medal at the Paralympics? 2 legs. The next step is gold mobilization. This includes convincing the clergy, segments of the civilian population with large amounts of gold, and local investors that are interested in gold-based investments to pool their gold into a national treasury. Of course, like everything, this won't be easy, and we'll need to involve a countrywide advertising campaign tinged with patriotic and nationalistic fervor. So, practically, how would gold mobilization work for this situation? The government would issue gold-denominated government bonds from which any interested citizen investor can buy into the scheme. These are the terms a real gold bond issued in Sri Lanka could look like. With a minimum investment into 1 gram of gold, any citizen can be involved in the market. The rest of the terms are self-explanatory to even unseasoned investors. So if you're interested, pause on the screen to read further. What are the advantages to the government in issuing such bonds? In the first place, since it involves initially an exchange of financial assets, no inflationary pressure would be generated. The subsequent impact would depend on whether the imports financed in effect by domestic gold bonds were for government or private sector use. If it is the latter, then the impact would probably become deflationary, since money would be extinguished in exchange for imports. In general, gold bonds would have just the same effect as borrowing from abroad, except that the imports thus generated need not be tied to any specific use or to any particular country of export, as it is the case for some foreign loans. Moreover, the cost to the government is not essentially different from the real cost of foreign loans of generating export surpluses, assuming interest payments are in gold. If interest payments are in a local currency, then no foreign transfer problems of earning foreign exchange to satisfy interest payments arise. And all that is involved is a domestic transfer between taxpayers and those who formerly held the gold. Since the gold bond represents simply a promise to pay gold at some future date in exchange for gold received currently, it means no domestic currency payments have to be made. So, there is no book loss to the government, resulting from the difference between internal and external prices of gold. The only place where this difference does manifest itself is in the interest cost item in the government budget. This is only an administrative matter, however, since what is economically significant is the interest cost in terms of foreign exchange, and this is the rate as determined by the amount of gold payable as interest on the gold bond. The size of such gold bonds would act as a constraint upon policies to devalue the foreign exchange rate. Devaluation would increase the real cost of servicing the gold bonds. Having gold-denominated government bonds will increase the confidence that Sri Lankans have in their own currency. For Sri Lankans even today in general, cash is king. The idea is to eventually shift our portfolio of foreign exchange assets into gold while maintaining a minimum positive level of foreign exchange reserves, so that not all reserves are tied up in certain foreign currencies because of needs of trade, as the government would want to issue the bonds for as a long a term as possible, since it will take time to increase operative productive capacity. However, because the liquidity of a gold bond is less than gold because of the delayed maturity, some potential buyers may have second thoughts about investing. So what we can do is to issue bonds of different maturity, which will mean fostering a market for such bonds with prices closely related to current gold prices, making them more liquid. Such bonds will become prime collateral for commercial and central bank loans. The bonds we do issue will need to be bearer bonds to facilitate ease of transfer and prevent money laundering. As you can see from this side, India has already started a scheme of similar proportions to ensure the state has sufficient gold in case of a crisis. During the tenure of Franklin Roosevelt, the US government decided to unplug from the gold standard due to issues during the Great Depression and decided to mobilize public gold. Even Vietnam contemplated mobilizing their gold to tackle various issues in the economy. So what is so special about the gold standard, apart from being functionally similar to international sovereign bonds, with the benefit of paying interest to our own citizens instead of a bunch of vulture funds? Before that, we need to understand what money is. Essentially, money is any item or verifiable record of said item that is generally accepted as a payment for goods and services and debts in a particular country or region. In history, we have had various types of money. Roman soldiers were paid partly in salt, which is where the word salary comes from. This was a form of commodity money. Representative money is the kind of money I am advocating for Sri Lanka in this video, the LKR, but backed by gold. The money we have today in most countries is fiat money, which is intrinsically worthless rags, but have a value because governments use the threat of force to compel its citizens to use it. So before we can discuss the positive sides of the gold standard or a gold-backed rupee for Sri Lanka, let's look at the drawbacks of these forms of money. Commodity money can be difficult to divide into component parts and locks people into just bartering. This is very inefficient. As anyone who knows anything about commodity money should know, commodity money is subject to sudden increase and decrease in value, depending on demand and supply. It also limits the scope of monetary policy, but whether this is a negative or positive depends on your perspective, I guess. Representative money also limits the scope of monetary policy. The paper money itself is intrinsically useless until it can be exchanged for gold or silver. And if there is an exceptionally corrupt state in place, even representative money can be debased like Nero did during Roman times. Fiat money is intrinsically useless if the government becomes unstable or falls. Moreover, it gives corrupt politicians too much power and allows them to steal from the population by printing more currency. Yes, money printing and the subsequent inflation that follows is a form of secret taxation that the citizenry never agreed to. Fiat currency only has value because the government maintains that value upon its citizenry by the implied threat of force. Because it is not backed by anything, its value will matter only on macroeconomics, monetary policy, market conditions, while accounting for central bank interventions. The history of fiat paper money is very old and stretches back to the Song dynasty in the 10th century AD of the nation we call today as China. This is an image of such a Song dynasty note. Even then, as history has shown us, the value of fiat money eventually returns to zero. I encourage you to research
质证交钞
of the Yuan dynasty when the currency crashed spectacularly. Now that we've discussed the drawbacks of every type of money, let's look at the positives. This is a list of characteristics an ideal form of money should have. Commodity money is intrinsically valuable, easy to use, difficult to acquire, stable and durable, difficult but not impossible to control, is somewhat non-counterfeitable, is somewhat taxable yet anonymous, but is not easily divisible. Representative money is not intrinsically valuable but has a value by proxy and is tied to something of actual value, easy to use, easily divisible, difficult to acquire, stable and durable, difficult but not impossible to control, is somewhat non-counterfeitable, is taxable yet anonymous. The only saving grace for fiat money, even from an objective standpoint, is that it's easy to use and easily divisible. I've also added cryptocurrencies here just for fun. Cryptocurrencies have no inherent value except the energy used by miners to power their GPUs. This is also evident when you see how volatile the crypto markets are, and the stability is abysmal. It also is not user-friendly at all to the common folk. What did the banker use for birth control? His personality. So, to tie it all together, why am I harping on the gold standard so much? Apart from the reasons already mentioned, there is another reason as well. Let's start with this quote by Norm Franz, a well-known monetary economist and the president of an influential investment company. Gold is the money of kings. Silver is the money of gentlemen. Barter is the money of peasants. And debt is the money of slaves. This world's economy is based on a debt-based system controlled primarily by banks. This is the system that we are looking to replace. We know from other research done on the debt supply side that the pool of money available for corporate lending has increased to around 74 trillion US dollars. Many publications and economists have been sounding the alarm about these corporate debt bubbles. Nations around the world have seen the writing on the wall and started heavily investing in gold. Gold will act as a cushion during financial downturns. China, Russia, and Switzerland are some of the countries that have ramped up their gold imports. In the event of a global financial crisis like 2008, gold reserves will retain their value while other forex tank, giving the Sri Lankan economy a cushion. Gold is an asset which has no corresponding liability. Gold is the only globally recognized monetary asset that can cross countries, languages, races, religions, and cultures. Gold is the last bulwark of economic security. Example, similar to the situation Sri Lanka is facing right now in 2022-2023 and is in need of an IMF bailout, in 1997 during the Asian financial crisis, when South Korea faced a serious debt crisis, the IMF provided a rescue condition that sold large South Korean companies at low prices. In the end, the South Korean government had no choice but to call on the private sector to donate gold to repay foreign debts, thus preserving the large enterprises that supported the country's economic independence. This sounds awfully familiar to the situation Sri Lanka is facing now, does it not? However, the difference is that the South Korean leadership had the foresight not to sell off its national assets, while our politicians have no clue how to solve this crisis apart from selling off our national assets. The gold standard changes the options that corrupt politicians in future can make because it limits their money printing ability and limits the scope of monetary policy. And last but not least, in conjunction with the forced repatriation and expropriation of funds stashed overseas by the private sector and cheap bridge financing, Sri Lanka will have approximately 15 billion US dollars to use as an industrialization war chest. This is the money Sri Lanka will use to expand our industrial capacity, start manufacturing and exporting so that we can start paying back all our debt and get more people working. That is the end of the 6th episode of the series, Our Elites Just Suck. The next episodes will continue explaining these solutions and the practical applications of industrialization. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe to make the algorithm gods happy. Share this video with your friends and leave me a comment if I've made any errors or if you just want to say hi. Thanks for watching.